So the thinking here is that lo-fi hip-hop has this kind of degraded, out-of-tune cassette quality feeling to it, which in theory works well, in theory, with microtonal music. Now, one of the reasons why I think that Christmas Time Is Here works really well with this lo-fi thing is because it uses a fairly traditional jazz harmonic vocabulary of things like sevenths and extensions and all those good stuff. All that good stuff. Apparently I don't have a traditional English vocabulary, so microtonal grammar. So the strategy here is you can take that jazz vocabulary and play it on two 12-tone equal tempered keyboards tuned a quarter tone apart. So it's like you're playing in between the cracks whenever you're switching between the two keyboards, creating this kind of, I don't know, it's a really weird and slippery and alien sounding harmony, but at the same time it doesn't really sound particularly jarring, at least to me anyway. Going back and forth between the two keyboards this way gives us 24 tones of equal temperament, which means we've divided the octave into 24 evenly spaced notes. I know, oh my goodness, it's crazy. But we don't actually have to stop there. We could actually divide the octave into any number of notes. We could, for example, divide it into groups of 19. Check it out. Pretty strange, right? Well, what's kind of cool about 19-tone equal temperament is that you can actually build a major scale using 19 notes. It's just the major scale looks a little bit different than the normal 12-tone equal tempered scale. So if you're going to build a normal major scale in 12-tone, it would be whole step, half step, whole step, half step, or 2-2-1, 2-2-2-1. It's a little bit different in 19-tone. In 19-tone, it's 3-3-2, 3-3-3-2. So the larger intervals are still large and the smaller intervals are still small, it's just by slightly different amounts, which means the major scale still sounds kind of the same, but also different. Let's actually compare the difference between 12-tone and 19-tone back to back. Major scale is so different, all the chords are also going to be different. The way that I like to think about the chords in 19-tone are, well, all the flats are flatter and all the sharps are sharper. Now, if you want to be a nerd about this, 19-tone equal temperament has better tuned thirds than 12-tone equal temperament, which means that the thirds better approximate the pure mathematical just intonation ratios of 5:4 and 6:5. The problem is that 19-tone equal temperament has worse tuned fifths than our normal 12-tone system, so it gives that kind of like out of tune vibe, which incidentally is actually just what we want for this lo-fi thing, so maybe that's a good thing. Now, there are systems of microtuning that use fairly in tune fifths, but relatively out of tune thirds. And generally we don't use these systems because our harmony is tertian, which means we build the harmony by stacking thirds. It's not the greatest idea to build harmony by stacking out of tune thirds, so for the most part we don't use these systems. There are ways around that though. For example, 17-tone equal temperament. Check this out. Alright, so this harmony was fairly quartal or quintal. Quintal? How do you pronounce that word? Quintal. Anyway, it's harmony that doesn't have that many thirds. They're treated kind of as a dissonance, which is similar to how thirds were treated in medieval music. In medieval music, you had a lot of harmonizations in fourths and fifths, but thirds were kind of explicitly avoided. So you can also have major scales in 17-tone equal temperament. The ratios in this case, instead of 2-2-1, 2-2-2-1, are going to be 3-3-1, 3-3-3-1. So the wide intervals are even wider, and the smaller intervals are even smaller. I really enjoy the sound of 17-tone equal temperament. I feel like McCoy Tyner's quartal approach to jazz comping in modal jazz like the 1960s would have sounded really great in it. Just check out how God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen sounds in 12-tone equal temperament, and then compare it to the arrangement in 17-tone. New York hot gog. So anyway, I think there's this trend towards wonkiness in our music. You got the wonky drum beats that are not quantized to the 16th or 8th note grid. And so this microtonal music, you can kind of think of it as pitches which are not quantized to the 12-tone equal tempered grid. Now in both circumstances, you kind of have to have a certain logic. You kind of have to approach it in a way that doesn't feel totally random. Now I won't lie, it took me a very long time to produce and perform those 3 arrangements of Christmas songs, because I was kind of having to start from scratch. I was kind of having to invent my own ways of performing microtonal music, and let me tell you, it's not easy. It's not intuitive at all. You know, music making really is influenced by technology, especially if you're coming to music making without any kind of formal training. You're just going to use the tools on hand and do what sounds good to you, and if the tools on hand look like this, you're going to create music that uses 12 notes. So I think what would be really awesome now are more tools to make it more intuitive to create these sorts of microtonal chords and harmonies and melodies in a way that feels more natural and not like you're trying to reverse engineer music from the inside out. A lot of people enjoy that challenge, and I certainly do, but it doesn't feel nearly as fluid and intuitive as relying on the tools that I normally do to make 12-tone equal tempered music. Part of that, I think, is my training. I am trained in 12-tone music, but I also think that the entire system is really geared towards that. I think it would be really cool, for example, if piano rolls in digital audio workstations could be adapted to different kinds of temperaments. Right now, you just have 12 notes, but imagine if you could alter that to, say, 17 or 19 or whatever. Anyway, these Christmas songs are now up on an EP on my Bandcamp that you can go check out if you'd like. There's both the 12-tone versions as well as the extended microtonal tempered versions for you to check out. If you enjoy content like this, consider donating to my Patreon, because it's the patrons over at Patreon that make this content possible. I've included a bonus video talking about some more theory involved and how I actually played and performed these examples in this video. So go check that out on Patreon right now, and yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys.
Peace.